I think I redid the intro to this video. Heck, I think I redid the entire video about 3 times this morning, unsatisfied with the vibe, the energy, the message, and I scrapped it and started all over again. When I never felt bad, come on, yeah. So, a couple of weeks ago, I had plenty of nifty ideas of what I wanted to do for content, for videos, and then real life came knocking at the door, and I had to put everything aside and focus on work and my university classes. I'm not saying that I consider this a chore or this is not sustainable anymore. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that I have to make work my priority because YouTube is not how I make my living yet. One of the topics that I wanted to address and talk about, and I even made a mention of it in my last video, is my own personal experience with mental health issues and that time when I had to take time off work because I was having a burnout. More specifically, I was dealing with anxio-depressive disorder, which is kind of like a combination of anxiety disorder and depression smushed together. And I thought a long time about how I wanted to present the content of that video. Was I going to talk about the factors that brought me there? But then I said to myself, that isn't really what I want to talk about, because when someone is dealing with problem X, you react to it in a certain way. But if someone else deals with that problem, they will perceive it and understand it and deal with it in a very different way. Because I could say, oh yeah, I had problem X, and somebody will go, I dealt with X, Y, and Z, and I'm still standing. And I didn't want to create that kind of situation where one person is comparing themselves to me and then judging me, or vice versa. I didn't want to create that. So what I wanted to do is talk about how it manifested and what made me go, yeah, you know what, this isn't normal. So I'm going to talk about those reactions that I had and what led me to go and see a doctor and get a doctor's note to excuse me from work. But first, a few disclaimers. First of all, I'm the kind of person who tends to exaggerate a problem. I'm a bit of a drama queen in that respect. I see something and I worry about the little details, the minutiae, and I'm afraid of the finished product. And I see a task, and instead of just saying, you know what, screw this, just do it and see what comes out of it, I get bogged down in the details and I stress over it a lot. And it's only once I'm in the middle of the task that I realize, this was nothing. I should have taken care of it a long time ago. The other thing also that is a bit of a quirk, or maybe a fault, depending on how you see it, is that I tend not to ask for help when I should. Because my mindset is, I'm dealing with my own problems, my own issues, my own situation. Who am I to judge, another person? Maybe they're dealing with their own set of issues, problems, situations. So why should I be burdening that person with my problems? I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't mind asking for help, but I always think about the other person first, and it ends up putting me in a situation where I'm tackling a situation on my own, which is not necessarily a good thing. The last thing about me that you need to understand is that when I see something simple that needs to get done, I take care of it. So, for instance, at home, if I see dishes in the sink, instead of letting them pile up, I tackle them. If there's laundry, I take care of it. And this is like a running to-do list in my head, and it's the same thing at work. I have this to-do list in my head, and I'm constantly checking things off, because if it doesn't get done, if it doesn't get done, who else will? So I'm doing it. So you need to understand that mindset of me before I start explaining the manifestations of my anxio-depressive disorder. So like I said, I'm not going to start making a list of all the bad things that happened to me. But I know for a fact that the issues that I started experiencing, the feelings that I started experiencing predate the time period where I said, okay, things are going poorly and fast. Was that I think I started taking things a bit too personally. That was the first manifestation. I mean, at the time, it's hard for me to say, oh yes, Madame la Prof, why are you taking things so personally? I think at the time I felt that I was being dissected, being judged, being criticized too much. It's easy to tell someone not to take something personally, and when you're in my line of work, when you're planning events, when you're organizing activities, whether they are for student life, leadership, or French immersion, when somebody tells you that you're taking things too personally, how can you not when you've invested so much time and effort in an event, in an activity? I mean, now I have to train my brain and disassociate myself from the event. But at the time, I knew something was amiss when I felt it was too much like a personal attack. So it brought me to a place of anger. I was often very angry. I was angry at myself for letting myself be trampled over like that. I was angry at others. I was expressing my feelings, my emotions, my reactions in a very angry way. I was also worried about everything. I felt like I wasn't being supported. I felt I was very much alone. And I could see my plate, my workload. I could see my plate being very, very full. And I felt like I was getting zero support. When I was given help and support, it ended up backfiring, and it gave me even more work. You know, you're told like, yeah, I'm going to help you, and you end up helping the person helping you help you. And I'm not saying that that person had poor intentions or bad intentions. I don't think it was planned that way. But I know that I felt like I had more work on top of my plate. And then, of course, I was taught, you're allowed to say no. So when I stepped away from certain activities, I was called out on it. And I was called out despite me being abundantly clear that I was stepping away because I needed to focus on other things that in my head were more important, more pressing. I was told I dropped the ball. I was told I neglected my duties. And even worse, when I was told not to worry about something, those same people who told me not to worry about those things said, well, why aren't you focusing on these things? It's like, didn't you tell me not to worry about it? It was very hard. It was very hard. I felt literally abandoned and alone. And when that happens, you are questioning yourself about everything. You're questioning yourself about your past actions. You're questioning yourself about your decisions, whether anything that you have chosen, decided, acted upon made sense, was the right thing to do, to the point where I was actually thinking about quitting. I was thinking about I shouldn't even be teaching. It was very difficult. It was very difficult because I had never ever thought that before. I had never in my entire career, and I had some really difficult run-ins with students, and never once did I say, I'm going to quit. Never. Ever. But that particular year, I was contemplating leaving teaching altogether. And that made me worry. It was to the point where I couldn't even celebrate my own successes. I presented a workshop at a provincial conference, and I remember coming home that night and just being exhausted. That was another manifestation. I was always exhausted. I was tired all the time. I got home and I slept a straight 3 hours, which usually, if that happens to me, full on insomnia. Let's go, okay? Naps in my world do not exist. It was difficult. The other big thing, and I knew it was a major problem, I was crying all the time. Now, I'm already a very emotional person. That's because I'm passionate, I'm authentic in my emotions, but at this point I was crying for everything. I wasn't even happy or sad. I was literally teaching, talking about something like the role of women in literature. I just started bawling my eyes out. It's like that made no sense. When I look back at that time, when I look back at that period of time in my career, I don't see it as a bad thing because I ended up learning a lot about myself. And also what I ended up learning is that it's not one single element that creates this situation. It's a lot of different elements and factors that contribute to the situation that you find yourself in. What's important to remember in this case is that you have to ask for help, and it is okay to stop and to say, like, I have to step away from it. What has to happen is that there needs to be more recognition about teachers' mental health and mental well-being. And no, it's not normal to cry all the time. And when I spotted it in a colleague the following year, I said, if you are not going to call the doctor, I will. And of course it was brutal, you know, and one thing I can tell you right now, when you are off, when you take that time off, it is not a time to catch up on work. It is not a time to worry about your students. I mean, you will be worrying, but if you want to be there for your students in the long run, long term, you have to focus on you. And that's huge. That's what we need to realize. We have to stop thinking about, oh, sacrificing yourself is part of the job. No. There should be no sacrificing of your social life, your mental health, your mental well-being. There shouldn't be any of that. If you are feeling anything that I have felt, that I described in this video, please speak to a therapist, speak to your family doctor. I didn't even have a family doctor. I didn't even have a personal family doctor. I just went to a walk-in clinic and I said, I need paperwork. I cannot go to work. And I had therapy. I went through therapy. It's not easy because you say to yourself, when am I going to have the time? But you have to make time. But you need to get help. So if what I have described in this video is happening to you now, get help, please. Because mental health and talking about mental health should not be something limited to one day a year. It needs to be ongoing, and we need to be more open about it and more supportive. And that includes everybody in the education system, not just teachers, administrators too, support staff, students, everybody. So on that lovely note, folks, have yourselves a lovely afternoon.